24.
That's going to be interesting.
That's when the email was sent.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
But I believe it's for 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday. I motion that we accept the consent
We're
agenda.
going to have public comment.
I was gonna just move the
Okay.
consent agenda. Accept the consent agenda as amended.
All right.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Anyone here for public comment? Nope.
Everyone.
Valerie, wanna come take a mic?
Well, pen-wise.
Yeah, that should be okay. At the last meeting, I made a promise at the last village board meeting that I attended, that in my position of chairperson of this, I hope you all continue to support me as chair after that declaration. In the interest of keeping that promise, I'm going to be recommending that we require community impact study to make about housing to the board for legislation of new laws. Almost all of the village boards require environmental impact studies before granting permits, variances, zoning adjustments, or code legislation. Of why presented before you here. I have repeatedly heard Mr. Serrario refer to a 31-year-old ordinance legislated in Burlington, Vermont by Bernie Sanders as a model. I traveled to Burlington, Vermont last week. I spoke with members of the zoning and planning and the community and economic development offices. I spoke to them about the proposed legislation in New Paltz. They were ambitious to advise extreme caution in developing a plan to minimize security deposits and negate contracts by ordinances. The Community and Economic Development Office was created to correct problems associated with what that 31-year-old legislation in Burlington evolved into. Reduced securities prevented local landlords from maintaining their properties adequately, causing rents to drop and local investors to suffer. This allowed many non-Burlington and non-Vermont resident investors to pay years. That average is $50 more than the current New Paltz average rent in a community with a lower per capita standard of living, meaning Burlington. This problematic law had unpredictably severely marginalized the low-income residents of Burlington. It led to the creation of tent communities of homeless people in and around the city and its parks. The city has also been transient tenants, were not held accountable for disrupting the community by their absent landlords. I have seen these disenfranchised communities and stayed in a motel in Winooski, a suburb of Burlington, where the homeless are sometimes housed by social programs. Mothers with children were living amidst other marginalized community members who had chemical dependency issues. Contrary to Ms. Tesserario's claim that the maximum security a landlord may charge in Burlington is $200, the current ordinance in Burlington allows a landlord to charge a maximum of 1 month's rent for security and then may collect the last month's rent with the first. It does not permit tenants to use security to pay rent. The same ordinance also does not support the breaking of contract leases in any way. I have attached copies of the ordinance concerning both points to this memo. This modified version of the older Burlington housing ordinance has not been sufficient to reverse the damage caused by the earlier law. I think that it's very important that we do thorough community impact studies when presented with proposals for changes to local ordinance and requests for recommendations to the village board. I believe studies about changes to current laws that concern a segment of our community must more importantly answer questions regarding how those changes might alter the character of the entire community. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave this with the board.
Thank you.
This was something I did independently. I presented it to the Landlord-Tenant Council, but I'm speaking for myself here, not the council. Thank you very much.
Anyone else public comment? Okay. Guy Kemp from the Affordable Housing Board will not be available tonight to provide us with the annual report, so we're gonna have to put that on a future agenda.
Do we have to approve the consent agenda?
We already did.
We approved it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have now what I'm describing as a final draft agreement. Does anyone have any thoughts on that final draft before we send it back over to Huguenot Street?
I read it twice. Looked good to me.
Looks pretty straightforward, right?
Let's get it done.
Yes.
Recirculate it to HHS with the intention of getting your final approval. Yeah, we made a couple of changes in terms of clarifying some language, so you should definitely take a look at it again.
And I'm sure it'll be fine.
Great.
And I didn't know if you needed copies of the updated.
I shared that with our board a few days ago when you sent it to us. So that's great, that's
Looks
moving
great.
forward.
We're very appreciative of this. I might just take a minute.
Do you want
Go to the mic.
here, come take a microphone?
Sure. Well, maybe, it's only a second, but I just wanted to have the opportunity to introduce to the board the new executive director of Historic Huguenot Street, which is Mary Beth DeFilippis.
Hello, welcome.
Thrilled to be here.
We'll see you again.
I look forward to working with you.
It'll be a face you'll be seeing more often, and I just thought it would be a nice courtesy to make the introduction, so thank you.
Great, and then our planner David did some work today. He wanted to come and chat with us. It's actually item number 12 on our agenda, so I wanted to move that up so that he can go home after he chats with us.
David Gilmore, Village Planner, here to speak to you about natural hazard planning. Specifically, there is an Ulster County natural hazard management plan that was developed and adopted in 2009. The Village of New Paltz did not participate. However, with the 5-year update of the 2009 Ulster County Hazard Plan, the Village of New Paltz in roughly late 2012 did start to participate. That plan is still in development, and I'm going to just provide a minute of briefing on the project and an upcoming public meeting that I understand you're considering scheduling, including so that we can promote public information and engagement on project development, evaluation of how we're doing with hazard planning in the Village of New Paltz as a participating jurisdiction within the county-led planning process. And I believe the last time I was here was with all of you on this topic particularly, it was in mid-2015 when I provided a briefing on the proposed plan departments that participate in hazard planning. So it's proposed for the village board to have an opportunity for public comment, and you're encouraging public comment on the county proposed hazard management plan at the second meeting in May. So that, I guess, would be the fourth Wednesday in May. And leading up to that, in conjunction with the building department and DPW and other divisions of the municipality, we will be providing a link to the county hazard plan on our webpage. If you Google Ulster County Emergency Management, on the left hand of the folio, you can see draft county hazard plan, and you can review it there as well. We'll also post bulletins on the planning project, and we will be developing annual update materials for the village with how we're doing with projects that we have in the natural hazard plan. Don't hold me to the number, but I think there's roughly 9 projects that we have in the plan. And as a preview, I would just advise that the village is making extraordinary progress with hazard planning. As you know, this community got, for unfortunate reasons, an excellent start with hazard planning, mitigation preparation in response to the natural disasters Irene and Lee, and you were a participating Ulster County New York Rising community. So you have a plan and resources for hazard planning there. And of course, the village has been doing a lot with resiliency of its critical facility, the wastewater treatment plant, with developing emergency response capabilities on both sides of the river, and multiple other projects, not just covered in the in the New York Rising Community Reconstruction Plan, but you're also doing a lot with stormwater management, green infrastructure planning includes and maintenance and management, as well as water resource planning, which is a frequent topic before your board. So that's just an overview of the counter-housing hazard planning process, your role within it. Public comment is encouraged. The planning department and the building department can help field questions. I'm sure the DPW can as well, and we'll be back to talk to you in the second meeting in May.
So my understanding of part of this is one of the requirements, and that's
Correct.
basically something that we have not done that we need to do.
So the last time you did
in
it-
addition to setting the meeting, I would like for Alex to send a note to the paper and just say, hey, community, we want your ideas regarding hazard mitigation planning. That,
Right.
I believe, will help us check off this box.
Right, so we didn't do it in calendar 2016. We did it in calendar 2015. It wasn't done in calendar 2016. We also need to do it for 2017. So this is our opportunity to hit both. And there's been a lot of preparations for that. And you have a lot of demonstrable work in project on your list. So lots of good work that's been done. We just need to document it. And it's important for being able to access grant funds, presuming they remain available at the federal level, which it seems like public safety and emergency planning and mitigation for natural as well as man-made hazards should be important from a public health and community basis.
Does this meeting have to be a standalone meeting, or can it be a part of a?
No, it certainly can be part of a village board public meeting. In the past, we haven't received many public comments going back. I think that the county, of course, we're doing lots of other stakeholder or interested and involved entity engagement. We're communicating with all kinds of public officials and other organizations as for hazard planning. Thank you. Have a nice night.
Thanks for staying late.
Sure.
Did you want us to stay for this endorsement piece in the historic Huguenot Street?
The letter, we already approved it.
Oh, we did, but approve the agenda, not only the agenda, but the items on it.
Yep.
The consent.
If it's on the consent agenda, it's been approved, so we'll sign it and get you a copy.
And just again, as clarification, if we approve the contract, we are done on the road closure?
Yeah, then we would need to approve it, and, yep.
Oh, so you have to, it has to come back one more time?
Right, I would think we would, if you have any tweaks, but I don't see any reason why, our next meeting is May 10th. If you get your comments back to me, in the week, it can get on our next agenda. I don't see any reason why our village board wouldn't approve it on May 10th.
Okay, great, but if we have no comments, is it already approved? It still needs to go back one more time?
We need to take action. Approve it.
We would still have to take action, right?
Yeah, it's still a draft.
Can we vote to approve it if there's no recommended changes from historic Huguenot Street? And just to not have to wait another 2 weeks?
We could vote for it to take effect in 2 weeks, pending no comments from interested parties.
I'm fine with that. If
So we
someone else
don't
make
know
that
when
mo-
they would give us a comment.
Well, why don't we put a deadline that they must give us comments by 13 days from
Yeah,
now?
tomorrow we can-
I do have a question. Do we need to send this to the county?
That's a great question. We'll find out from our attorney.
So we should probably
Yeah,
just put
that's
this
the
off
only
to 2
thing
weeks.
Very often, the county planning board needs to approve as well.
I'm trying, all
In 2 weeks.
right, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nice meeting you.
Okay, I put the next item on our agenda, this public square in front of the post office. This is just the idea of, the concept of using the approximately 4,000 square feet as green space. We're maintaining the exact number of parking spots that are currently in that parking lot. So we currently lease that parking lot from the Kempner Corporation. With Kempner about this is we're going to submit an updated version of the lease, and then they're going to come back to us with whether they like our suggested changes or not, but currently the lease is a year-over-year lease. So I think what would make sense is if we had a 10-year term, so any improvements that are made to the property, and I would anticipate that any improvements that are made, we're hopefully gonna get some downtown businesses interested in something that is as maintenance, that needs as little maintenance as possible. And the professors at the college have drafted a design that that heads in that direction. So, you know, I basically just put this on here as a placeholder to, you know, push our board and our attorney to just make sure that this is moving forward. If anyone has had any questions.
I was surprised to find out just in shopping in that area that one of the business owners apparently is not a fan of this plan. And how was the reception among the business owners? Is there general consensus that people are into it?
I think I know the business owner that you're
Yeah.
talking about, and I've spoken with that person, and I understand the concerns. I understand where they're very excited and supportive and interested in contributing towards some of these improvements.
Or any other businesses besides that one that?
I have not heard any
I just-
other
yeah, just-
objections.
Yeah, I didn't mind. I just didn't know about it and didn't know how to respond.
I've spoken with that business owner about the history, and I think I understand, you know, where some of it stems from too. And I completely appreciate where that feeling comes from. I get it.
The most recent plan that came from the professors, does it include making use of the section of green lawn that's next to Wells Fargo? I know the green design was more towards the corner, and it seems like kind of a dead area. Is that going to be reconditioned to parking
Well, that
once
green,
the green space is
no,
opened up?
that green lawn next to Wells Fargo is curiously its own separate street block and lot number. It's its own separate.
Is there any chance of us trying to get that and including it in this?
Do you know, do you know who owns that?
I do know who owns it,
Okay.
but I'm worth asking the question.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question, but I think the answer might be no.
Yeah, we've thought about ways to approach that property owner, but
So when this is finalized, presented to the board and to the public, you know, as a mature thing, you may anticipate some questions potentially from a business owner, and you know about the possible for mischief and bad actions happening in this area. So just be prepared for those questions. If the business owner doesn't ask them, I'll probably ask it just to get it on the record. So,
sounds good.
okay.
The NBR committee discussed, you know, part of the challenge with basically anything that's north of Trib 13 to the force main. So that means if any of the other properties that are on private septic, they cannot connect. It would require new additional municipal sewer service that does not currently exist. So that's just a wrinkle that I think we're all kind of scratching our heads about in terms of, well, we've reimagined this zone from a highway district to the NBR, but have we set the zone up for success if it doesn't have the infrastructure?
Yeah, that's kind of what the whole NBR committee is about. And Joe Mana, actually, last week when we were walking the entire NBR zone, she did bring up that point, and it was part of the discussion, and it's definitely one of the things that we're looking to address.
Do you think the NBR committee is going to make a recommendation on that?
I hope so.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for the entire committee.
You know, it's an obvious question. If we want to develop the zone for, you know, for growth, and it has no water and sewer, that is kind of a structural impediment. That's the very definition of a structural impediment.
Well, it has any of the properties that are connected to the sewer would continue to have sewer. So here's is connected to the Muni sewer that's uses that force main. The Gateway, Bosse's, My Market, Village Arms, they all connect to that force main. And then there are other properties that do not. So that's the challenge. So it's not like every property is connected,
Gotcha.
only some are.
And for the planning geeks on the board, of which I am not one, what does a planning board do in terms of this sort of a situation? Or is it up to us as a village board to figure it out before that? Just make me smarter, because I honestly don't know.
Well, from a planning point of view, either of those could be the case. In many instances, property developers take on infrastructure development. For example, they frequently build roads, and they frequently put in sidewalks. But if we want them to be attracted in the first place, then we may have to have a plan, maybe a long-term plan, to put in infrastructure where there is none, and to figure out how to use the infrastructure that is there if we want to convert properties from one use to another.
Well, I think that should be an ongoing topic for our board, and we shouldn't put it off.
Yeah, it should.
Absolutely, and part of the problem is that if somebody decides to develop within the zone, and then someone in between that property and the main decides that they want to, you kind of need to cut back in. It's much more efficient to just do it once for everybody than it is to do it piecemeal every time someone has a project. So that's part of what the NBR committee is considering as we go through and look for our recommendations.
And, you know, we all know how challenging it is to find that kind of infrastructure money, right? Like,
Absolutely.
So what we've done as, you know, this administration and past administrations, we focused on trying to chase down money to update.
All that many properties that would need the upgrade, so it's definitely something we should keep on our radar.
You know, Jim has definitely got this on her radar
Uh-huh.
as the leader of the NBR committee. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
And I guess the other, this is on our wish list of needed water projects, is that's a one-way water main. And if we were to update that water main, we would definitely want it to be a looped system down to Bosse's and back. So that's on our wish list of, you know, plus $9 million worth of water main projects too. All right, Dennis, you were gonna, or we wanted to talk about first about the alternates for the Landlord-Tenant Relations Council. Did we hear from the one person who had originally expressed interest in being a member?
Yeah, she's unavailable to come on any Wednesday until her teaching schedule changes.
Community would like to be a alternate.
Well, right now we have two
Tenant member.
landlord alternates.
I think we have one
We have one.
landlord alternate.
We have one.
Dennis McGee is the alternate, and then the two landlords are Donna Dietz and Ed Burke.
Mm-hmm. And Val Irwin.
Well, she's.
Well, she's-
There's supposed to be 3 of the landlords and 3 tenants.
Yeah, 3 landlords, 3 tenants,
Okay. Valerie
but Dennis is an alternate.
and okay. Gotcha.
So 2 tenants?
We need a tenant alternate and we need an at-large alternate. Right.
Well, we have a landlord alternate.
Right. So we need a tenant and we need an at-large alternate.
A what?
It did the at-large person.
We do have an at-large.
Alternate.
An at-large alternate?
I don't know if there's a position for that. Do you know?
We just made up this idea of landlord and tenant alternates anyways.
You know. I mean, I'm not sure why this is on here. Who's requesting alternates?
Because Dennis expressed interest, so we put him on as an alternate.
Okay.
So we thought it made sense if we're gonna have a landlord alternate, we should also have a tenant alternate.
Okay.
That's why I added it to the agenda.
All right. Great.
And I'm going to suggest just for the future that we continue our conversation of potential tenant issues after the election, as it's an
Well,
issue in the
That kind of
campaign.
segues into 5A update.
Yep.
The council, we met last week. We actually had our first test case of a resident requesting mediation. It didn't work out because the other party was not willing to mediate, but it did help flesh out a lot of our just what we need to get as far as process and forms and getting a routine and a structure and a system set up for residents to come to us with issues. The other thing that we are doing is for our next meeting, we're all bringing a list of the different issues that we feel need to be addressed by the village board, or I think they feel should be addressed by the village board, and they're going to compile that into a large recommendation for us to consider. So this is not going away as a result of the election being over. The Landlord-Tenant Relation Council is very focused on pushing for a fair and equitable system that works for both tenants and landlords.
Completely agree with that.
Yeah.
I just want to put a marker that we want
Well,
to continue
absolutely.
the
No,
conversation.
it's important to keep it on the radar.
Yep.
Okay, so the next item, I was just interested in taking a closer look at what's in this investment portfolio that we have for the fire department, just because it might make sense to just be mindful of the fossil fuel related stocks. I'm going to wait and put it on a future agenda to continue to talk about that.
I like the idea.
Doesn't sound like you can talk much more.
I'm sorry, I didn't bring more of my coffee.
I actually went to
wanna call
I was
it
at the high school and I spoke to 2 participation in government classes this morning. So that was fun.
Sure, blame it on the high school. Do you want a cough drop?
Sure.
He's got cough drops.
So I motion that we, find, and we're good with that. Yes. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
The next is the consideration of the Shade Tree Commission, the proposed law changes.
I just traded texts with the chair of the Shade Tree Commission. Actually got the most recent one at about 7:01 this evening. It was pretty long. Is there any urgency to this? I just wanted to make sure that I explained to him by text, which is not the most efficient way, my interpretation of what it said. He wanted to make sure that SCC agreed with the language and the intent, so they're meeting tomorrow night. Do you put this to the next meeting?
I'm fine with that. I would share that. I spoke with Neil, who's also on the Shade Tree Commission, and he was good with these changes. So,
Yeah, okay.
but I'm fine.
Defer
if
to
you
May
wanna-
10th?
Yes.
And I just caught something, I missed something. We did approve the consent agenda pretty quickly. I had a minor addition to the minutes, so how do we handle that with minutes that are already approved?
I'm okay with making the change.
Oh, great, that's just really minor. Under item number 4, the commitment to water investigations, I just wanted to make note of the $88,000 number that we agreed on. There was a lot of back and forth to get there, so I just wanted to memorialize that number in the
I was
minutes.
going to say, you're the deputy mayor, you can just say that you move that the minutes as approved may be amended to account for this one factor.
Second.
I think it was in the newspaper. It was in the newspaper, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah. So, appointments to the Environmental Policy Board. We currently have 2 potential members, one of whom was going to attend last evening, but sounded like Tim and Tom do tonight, so he couldn't make it. And we did have another gentleman who had been interviewed. And I guess the Environmental Policy Board talked about it a little bit. And what we wanted to suggest to the board with regard to membership, we have a potential member who is a resident of the town, but also has expertise, professional expertise.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So the suggestion was, with regard to the composition of the Environmental Policy Board, that no more than 1 member may be a town of New Paltz resident. And I'm going to go do this slowly so Alex can get it down. Okay. Provided that no Village of New Paltz resident has volunteered and is available, and last, that candidate has professional experience in timely issues before the village board.
The only, may I make it
course.
very friendly?
Of course.
It's no town of New Paltz resident, town of New Paltz outside the village.
The asterisk, yes, important.
Very important.
So no town of New Paltz resident
Maybe
outside of the village.
In parentheses.
Okay. So the bottom line is, 1 member might be a townie, provided they have professional expertise which relates to an environmental issue under discussion by the board. And I was gonna, once the language is cleaned up, make that motion unless you'd like to wait till next meeting, with the two-meeting rule.
And it's with the person that's been appointed from the town has that until their appointment as term is over. Is that what you're, I just want to clarify?
Well, it's a good question that I think could be probably well addressed if we have this appointment limited to one-year terms, which could be renewed. But this way, if there are village, not the band, village people who step up and have some interest, then, the board could consider whether they want to appoint the village person or renew the other person. I think that would be a good procedural way to
Is this
address
only
it.
for EPB?
Well, that's
Was that your motion?
that's the motion, yeah, because it was in that context. And we really weren't facing that reality that I'm aware of with any other.
No, I don't think we are.
So we're gonna do this at the next meeting?
Why don't you just do it now?
I don't know.
It's,
Second.
yeah.
I'm not
Second,
doing
I'm
those.
seconding.
I don't know.
The Environmental
Yes.
Policy Board. And someone who's better with names want to remind us
I
of.
think Ted's name is Ted Nitsa. I met with him today at 1 o'clock.
And he has been to the last two Environmental Policy Board meetings.
So he's an amazing contributor. We're lucky to have him interested in this work.
So I think it's motioned and seconded.
All in favor?
Right? And do you want me to go into the EPB discussion of drilling, or you want to do that later?
No, go ahead, do it.
Okay. So Tim was at the meeting last evening, which was great, and appreciated everyone, appreciated that. Bob Hughes, former member of the Town Environmental Commission, was there, and Commissioner Rachel Lagotka has great interest in the Millbrook Preserve, so it was good to have all this input. What I got from the discussion was that the Environmental Policy Board was suggesting a standard operating procedure by the village when it comes to any consideration of well drilling. And they'd be, number one, early testing, or early identification and testing of wells which could be affected by test drilling. Public outreach early in the process. And it was on, I want to be clear on this, it was on the written questions that Commissioner Lagotka sent to us 20 minutes before the meeting. And when it wasn't raised, I reminded her that she had put it in her list. And so I didn't want to, I think I said it at the meeting, I don't want to put any words in anyone's mouth. But the third point was to have an independent hydrologist take a look at any potential effect on the Millbrook Reserve with regard to the drilling we're looking at now. And so those are the three things that the EPB suggested in terms of what we do to institute a standard operating procedure for whatever well drilling projects we might look at.
I don't think we necessarily want to automatically have to hire a.
They were aware of the fact that we do have a hydrologist that we're using. The hydrologist looking at that project right now is hired by the private party who owns the land. And I would, I would like to have our own eyes on it in terms of our own hydrologist.
You would like to have that before there is any direct involvement by the village?
Well, I think this work is being done, I think I'd like to have that done before I've had, and I really don't want to get into any sort of a long discussion, but there have been situations locally where
I've been contacted by several people in the community, and the initial test before a 72-hour test, you still want to identify some wells to monitor during the test. So I'm also in agreement that let's have more of those test wells that we think we need, than we think we need, right? So if we make an effort just to reach out to, that many more neighbors, or just encourage the private landowner to do the same thing. I think that will be a very useful way to, see what the cone of influence is, even in that initial step test or 8-hour test or whatever it might be called.
well, I think it's, we can move on from this, but I think it is a good idea for us to have some sort of a standard operating procedure that we apply to the current project.
Procedures of the Department of Environmental Conservation not be satisfactory?
Well, they are not charged in their community. That's our job. Certainly, we want to follow them, but local sensibilities. I think it would be that we're looking at that whether a private reserve prudent.
Well, Chillicothe was a big proponent of agreeance. Like that's what we should, make an X. Or on the side of being. I think that would be potentially impacted.
So I would like to come up with.
The properties across, and they would be good.
Are we going to therefore require all of the testing and something goes wrong? And you have your standard operating procedure?
This is voluntary.
It's voluntary?
Yeah.
I guarantee you it won't be voluntary long.
Well, I think the idea was to give people advance notice.
Into your standard operating procedure.
Well, I'm sure if I don't, you.
Intersection, the design improvements for that area.
Looks great.
The residents at Woodland Pond, people really want improved pedestrian access. And this project will be very useful as far as checking off that box. Solution here where we'd be declaring the intersection modifications at Mohawk and Route 208 a type 2 seeker action.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then I'd also like to authorize Bernier and Larios to proceed with an advertisement for public bids for contract Village of New Paltz 173 for this intersection.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hydrant and valve replacement project, a type 2 seeker action.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we were trading some emails about declaring May Lyme Disease Awareness Month.
We've traded a lot of emails, and unfortunately, many of them seem to they don't arrive. And I can read it out to you now. What I did was just, because they should not have been together, into two different whereases. So
Parse the words.
I hope you're right.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. And I remember at the last meeting, Dennis said he wanted to make sure he reviewed it. Were you fine with the draft?
I sent only this brief statement that I thought was adequate, but Alex convinced me that because the town had passed the longer statement, that we should be with them in that. That's the reason for this back and forth stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with it. But let's get it done before May.
Okay. I will make sure that
It's almost May.
Was that,
either
was that a
I send
motion?
or Alex gets and sends you the exact text.
Second.
Excellent.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, you're the deputy mayor. Do something, deputy mayor. Come on. Step up here.
Okay, DPW request, oh, and by the way, I did get a strep test, and so far it looks fine, but yeah, it's been everybody. DPW request approval to purchase a new trailer, $76.50.
It's pretty looking in the brochure. Better be for 26 grand.
26 grand, yeah.
And the reason we're buying that is because our old one broke.
No, I trust the judgment of the DPW. I'll second that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was part of the list of equipment that we prioritized, and this thing was at the top of the list in terms of being replaced.
Okay, let's all say aye.
Aye. And that's what it looks like.
Merzig
Yeah,
retainer.
and I don't think we need to go into executive session for this. So I'm the ZBA's liaison, and I had occasion to want to speak with this attorney, and I was cautioned by several people that he's really expensive and he charges for blowing his nose, I mean, that he charges for every single thing to the
I think
extreme.
you're talking about the ZBA attorney.
Yeah.
This
yeah.
is Dave Merzig, water
Oh, he's the
sewer.
water guy. Never mind.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to set public hearing for the gateway map on the May 10th meeting.
Second.
Aye.
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 And I'm asking the board for authorization to get an independent appraiser for the approximately 1,800 square feet next to the 15 Platico Avenue, or the parking lot near 15 Platico Avenue.
That was the recommendation for our attorney.
Oh, no, I was gonna,
New York Rising?
New York Rising, yeah. So I met with the New York Rising people. I shared the email, I think, after the meeting. You know, we basically have to probably come up with $2 million to augment the $4.7 million from New York Rising to build the 2 fire stations. And then we're trying to make sure that the hardening project down at the wastewater treatment plant is as lean and mean as possible, so we can use as much New York Rising money for the fire stations. So the hardening will just be improved drainage and piping, or pumping, down at the wastewater treatment plant. And then the folks from New York Rising, we were also talking about who we want to use as a construction manager during all 3 of these projects, the 2 firehouses and the hardening. So we're gonna have a conversation about that this coming week.
Was there still talk of creating a berm down at the?
No, the berm project's like $3.5 million.
Okay.
So that's a pretty expensive insurance policy.
It really pains me to do this at 7:59, but Rebecca and I have been speaking about something I'd like to discuss with her. She'd like to discuss it. Hopefully we can get out of here quickly, but let's do that at 7:59.
Did you want to do the conservation easement stuff?
I think I
Are
would
we
much
doing that
rather.
next time?
Yeah, I really want Will to get a good look
Okay.
at it again, because.
So now we're talking
Yeah.
about land. Got
Yeah,
it.
it didn't come to us until yesterday, so, and I wasn't comfortable with it. Moving
And
forward.
we're not gonna make any motions or action.
No action will be taken.
No actions will be taken.
I'll turn this off. Thank you. Is that turned off?
Yeah.
Y'all sound like you have cooties.
Believe me, I